uh, just what if Issei was a blacksmith? Now, I kind of got this idea thinking in like earlier today, so yeah. So Issei, he's doing his main thing, that is forging in this version. And I'm gonna say the student council allows it as long as he makes them weapons. Whatever weapon they request, he has to make it. But they will like pay for the gear and for his service and everything, because it's not easy to make these weapons that he makes. He makes weapons that are damn right good. He makes the gauntlets that would even make Drake blush because of how good it is. He's made a spear that even makes the one that the legendary Longinus, the spear, that one even makes that one look bad. He's made a pair of like scythes. He's made a scythe that would make the Grim Reaper impressed, and he's even made a sword that could cleanly chop through, well, steel. Like you can put a kind of like clean cut in steel. That's how good the weapons he makes are. They're that razor sharp. In fact, he's made a katana so razor edge that he can cleanly cut through a car door, glass and all, clean. And this kind of surprises everyone that every time they see him weapon test, they're like, dude, there's no way that weapon's going clean through that. And one time he even took a battle axe and like completely like cleaved through a boulder, which honestly is more difficult for Mitsuda and Motohama on the Forge Club, because they have to do this every day. Like, he's got a home forge, he's got the one at school, for the Blacksmith Club, yeah, which is just Issei, Mitsuda, Motohama, and that one girl, Aika Kiryu. Yeah, she's on that club too, just because, like, she likes blacksmithing stuff too, and they actually all four have swords they each made. And they each have a weapon Issei gave them as a gift. For Aika, it's a pair of basically like Damascus glasses. It's kind of like Damascus steel with Issei's kind of special steel on it, which I'm gonna say he just buys it, refines the steel to a perfect ore to it, and just makes it. Which, if I'm gonna be honest about it, that takes like a lot of work to do, which he does every day. He usually just, when he's forging, wears a black tank top or his regular red t-shirt, though at some points it'll actually catch on fire when he's using the hammer on molten steel. Though if it does catch on fire, he just straight up will just fling the hammer in the air, tear the shirt off, throw it on the ground, throw it backwards for them to catch, or usually they'll catch it, and he'll just catch the hammer and keep pounding the hammer every single time. And they can't really just tear him off a job after he started doing it. He always wears a headband so he won't get his hair in the forge, because he doesn't want his hair to burn off. So yeah, every day he just starts hitting the hammer. Now, some people call him a hammer swinger, as they always hear his lightning hits. Now Issei, right, his area for his area for the weapons, like, his forge is actually right between the student council and the occult research club. As they were thinking about actually grabbing the members from this club, sure that they were all four perverts, but they weren't that bad of people, honestly. They're just a little perverted. What do you expect? I guess the really biggest pervert there, Issei's just kind of got his dreams, even though he knows they'll never happen, or at least thinks that. Now, every hit he does with this hammer actually intrigues them, as one day he saw Kiba doing his regular white knight persona stuff, and he thinks, oh, so they call him the Knight Prince? Oh, I got a special thing for him. And Konako, who's oddly strong for her size, oh, she acts like some sort of like beast. I got something special for her too. Thinking just out of stupid curiosity what he should make for them, makes little gauntlets for Konako, which honestly would make even Drake be surprised on how good they are. Because this made even, like, the boosted gears gauntlet look a little bit bad and shabby, like, design. And made an Excalibur for Kiba, since he seemed to like such a white knight. It even one point making a suit of white armor, just to F with Kiba, just as a joke. So he pulled out this white armor with a sword that was Excalibur, with the design of Excalibur. As he put it on the side as Issei had it on the side of the gear, he walks up to Kiba, not wearing it, but wearing his, blacksmith attire, his belt, his gauntlets, his kind of like actual gloves for, his belt, his actual stuff, and his regular boots he would wear, so nothing that fell on his foot would crush his foot, wearing steel-toed. As he walks up, barely wearing a black tank top, he says, "Hey, Kiba, what's good?" Kiba's like, "Can I help you?" Seeing him and Konako walk into the club room, he's like, "Hey, yeah, I gotta speak to you two." "Alright, how can we help you?" As he said, "For the White Knight," undraping one of the biggest things. He's uncovering a giant white, like, armored knight with a legendary sword that looks like Excalibur, saying, "What's with this?" It's for the guy who always acts like a white knight. This kind of feeling like a little bit of an insult, saying, "Really?" Yeah. And for the basic mascot of Kuo, pulling out a cat-looking armor. They kind of had feline designs, like claws and everything, for the gauntlets, saying, what's this?" "Oh, it's just a little bit of gear for the, little kitty cat acting girl of the school," saying, "Really? There's no ulterior motive behind this? I mean, other than the fact I'm messing with y'all? No? Wait, so this is just a prank? Oh no, y'all get the weapons, I just do this as a joke. Also, tell the student council I gave them to you, so y'all don't get in trouble for having them at school. Kiba, I'll need you to return the, I'll need you to actually give me back the mannequin that's holding this all year, because, getting these stands are not that easy." "Alright." And really, it's just a stand to hold it, but he actually knew, he could kind of guess Kiba's measurements, as most of the girls had kind of lined it up. And he had Aika and, Motohama help him with the designing the size and shape of each weapon, because they could both look and see the exact size of people, and they would tell him which would be too big and too small, then putting them on saying, "These are like perfect fits, I'm surprised." And then they actually were super surprised when they noted that these weapons were also perfectly made for them, as if they were just specifically for them only. The weapon fit only to Kiba's hand, no one else would ever work with it, and it just felt perfect. Konako's gloves made it feel like they were just made for her. They weren't really adjustable though, which meant if she outgrew them, she'd have to get brand new ones, which, honestly, Issei kind of planned for. Knowing that his crafting was the best in the town, really in the world, never really kind of trusting anyone else's crafting, even having his own swords and everything on his own home, because he doesn't live with his family. Because of his foraging habit and the fact that I would wake them up way too early, they live in a completely different area of the town, like a mile and a half away from Issei. Well, Issei lives in a giant area with a huge house and a huge, blacksmithing area, a forge. And Issei's doing this little thing. He met that girl, what's her name? Rainier, I forgot her, the one she went by. Rainier, that whole thing when it's canon. And then Issei actually asked her a question before she leaves. "Hey, what's your favorite kind of weapon?" As she described the holy spear. She described a holy spear, which, if y'all don't know, just look up High School DxD spear, and you'll see it. It's basically that ultimate gear, and he actually made it where he basically just then makes it for her, designing it completely to her body shape and size. As he did this, though he actually made one little faulty error, not really on purpose, but actually wound up working for her. It was actually adjusted sizing to fit her full grown, in case she outgrew it. She couldn't really outgrow it. She needed to kind of grow into size to wield it like a regular weapon. Luckily for her, her fallen angel form was perfect for it. Issei wasn't expecting a fallen angel form, but whenever at the end of their date, right when he gives this to her, before she says anything, "Would you die for me?" And this is when he's about to say, "Repeat that again?" And she actually said, "For my plans, you'll have to die," stabbing him in the chest with the same spear he just gave her. And then Issei kept standing, saying, "You think you could kill me like that easily?" Starting to somewhat laugh, saying, "This is a flesh wound. I get hit with stronger steel on the daily. You didn't thrust that anywhere near as you'd need to." And she said, "Oh, really? Well, I mean, it's the best weapon I've ever seen, but I guess I do need to practice with it." Stabbing him with a light spear instead. And she said, "Yep, that'll do it." as he hit the ground, her saying, "Wow, this really is the best spear I've ever used." Looking at the sword covered in Issei's blood, which he swung off, surprising Issei a little bit about why he have to make such a good forge for her. Her looking at this saying, "Wow, maybe we should have kept him alive and kept him forging on stuff for us." Well, whatever. As she kind of left, Issei saying, "I'm not gonna die this way. I guess I will. I just wish I could see that chick Rias one more time." Boobies. As he was about to pass out, right when he goes down, Rias revives him and everything. That goes his cannon. First, second day goes normal. Then whenever Kiba actually escorts Issei, Issei actually sees that Kiba's actually got a stand in the club room with his white knight armor that Issei made. And on the other side of the door, there's actually one for Konako as well. So on the right and on the left, there's Kiba and Konako protecting. And then he's like, "Hey Reese, I got a question for you. Would you like me to make you armor and everything?" Her saying, "I don't know. I don't really wear armor. Well, it's kind of lightweight armor. No, I know how good of a craftsman you are. Sure." As she actually made her a battle gear that looked remarkably like the red gauntlet era armor she had, with like better gear though. It was like looking like that, but it actually was the same kind of crimson red with different gems on it. Really wasn't gems, they were more joint areas, but still. As she looked at this, wondering if it would even fit her, saying yes, it fits perfect, oddly enough. As this is when Akeno would want the same thing, but saying she wanted like a priestess uniform. Looking at the one she had told him about, he's like, "I think I can do that, yeah." Next day he comes back with armor and a surprising weapon for her. It's not what she was expecting. As he's been given access to magical things, he learned that he looked around the spells that Hephaestus would cast to make, the things Hephaestus would do to make the weapons for Zeus, noting that was actually a spell. That he could finally read it and he set it out. It would grant him the materials he would need to make the lightning bolts. Surprising that he knew how to make this, asking where he got this, as he showed a book, how to make weapons, and he thought some of them were just jokes, being that no one could make the lightning bolts, but here we are. Surprising them a little bit. Next day he met Asya, and their first day they talked, while they were walking, he actually asked her if she liked any weapons. As she described a cross sword, Issei actually noted it down and actually created it. That a few days later, he saw her, didn't have it on him, since he was going to that request. Same one. He was like, "Asya, how could you?" And she was like, "You're a devil?" As he said, "Yes," but as he still fought freed to almost a bloody standstill, he even summoned out one of his weapons to basically hit Freed with a regular, sword. Though it looked like it was used against a dragon before, which was his special design for it, called the Dragon Slaying Sword. Actually, quite accurate, though it looks nothing like the one in the series. It looks more like it was already sliced in by dragons and everything. So yeah, it looks a little sliced up, which was actually from testing it against, real creatures. Now, if you're wondering what could cut this, it was actually surprisingly not what you'd expect. He was doing this, and it was against a stray devil that the spear got, his sword got, messed up a little bit with claws. And he called it the Dragon Slayer, but that was all it had ever gotten the name of. Though it didn't really kill any dragons yet. As he's basically just wielding it out, going toe-to-toe with him, right when he's about to go down because of the shots in his legs and everything, Kiba comes in with Excalibur stopping him. Even then, on his other hand, having the Holy Eraser to back up the Excalibur sword, to help him fight this dude. Just for them to have to take Issei and run, because the Fallen Angels, and they couldn't fight them right now because, reasons. Issei was kind of their tank, their trump card for this one, and they didn't have any other gear other than the sword and gauntlets that Konako and Kiba had. That was it. Now, when they actually get told about what's going on, right when Issei tanks off storming, he goes and grabs a gear. The same gear he wanted, which was actually he turned on his boosted gear and was willing to go train. Well, not train, but go kill the fallen angels. As he ran in, thinking either the Exorcist or Rainier would deal with this, saying whenever they met Reus and them, oh, looks like we have some fun too, and actually get to fight you. Just for issei to say, oh. As she's wearing her armor, which basically looks like her uniform, but with like slight kind of chainmail and everything, which wasn't what she was expecting, as it could basically stop shrapnel, yes, but she wasn't expecting what else there was. There was a small plate in it, each one, that were light as a feather, but also able to withstand up to a full-on hit of destruction, and may barely even be scratched. Now, this made it where issei busts in, have one red gauntlet, a giant black katana that was 6 foot tall, with no sheath. And he was just rapidly swinging, busting in, seeing Konako and Kiba right next to him. Konako being the one who kicked the door in, wearing her gear that issei made, and it being a perfect fit for both of them. Then busting in, actually fighting on an even battleground, then finally finishing it. Hold on a second. Anyway, back to the video. As Kiba basically goes in charging, Freed gets hit by a bookshelf, and he's like, oh, I'm not letting that happen again, as he has to barely stop a katana just for the katana to chop clean to his light sword, and actually hit him in the side. Cutting up a little bit just for Excalibur, issei's variant, hit him in the other side, and being like, you know what, F this, I am out. Light bomb, and takes off. Seeing this actually surprises them a little bit. They weren't expecting him to start running, but it's whatever. They weren't going to chase after someone who just teleported away. Now, they were wanting to, but they wound up not doing it, just as they were going down to get Asya. And they said, go on, issei, take her out of here. We can win this. Kiba going with 2 swords, Konako putting the claws out of her weapons. Think Wolverine claws, but with an extra 5 on each fingertip, just slicing on whatever got too close to it. As it would just rip them, it would rip whoever it was apart that these were in the way of, and it actually injured most of them. Now, I'm not going to say that, yeah, they basically were cutting through these guys like hot knives through warm butter. Like, it was easy. At one point, issei even said, alright, well, when you're done, catch up with me. He only gets up the stairs before they're all done, and Rainier would actually fly past and go grab them. Wouldn't even go to grab Kiba or Konako, just going to grab issei, as kind of just laughing in his face with her spear. Alright, back to the video, guys, as they basically escape, barely, but not quite, as basically issei, enraged, finally hit the second form of his gear, that goes as normal, and he actually is able to get Asya. Now, we still have a few things we have to go with, like what happened to everything else. And by everything else, I mean what happened to the other people in this. Well, Reus just barely walks up to find everyone looks a little bit odd, just to see a slightly injured issei taking down Rainier like it's nothing to him. Anyway, issei basically went over and did something she wasn't expecting, pulling out his actual blacksmith hammer and slamming it forward, breaking one of her arms. As he said, you're done. Taking Twilight Healing, giving it to Asya, that went as canon. And then, the next few days, nothing was big until dealing with Riser. Now, dealing with Riser was a whole other battlefield. Now, issei said, alright, it's time we actually get y'all geared up. Reus being in Crimson's-like armor, and she actually noted it felt like it was a feather, but it was also the best armor she'd ever been in, which she'd only been in like 3 different sets, all made for her. But back to the whole thing, surprisingly, issei doesn't really care about doing much other than blacksmithing, though he still has his dream being the Harem King, and actually was wondering, is there a chance Reus and them could be with him? So like I said, then Riser's thing happens, And for the training, issei still made weapons, so everyone was good with the ones they had. Issei made them all training versions, which basically were the same exact weapon for them, which they were like, why? And he said, because we're going to destroy them. What? You're going to destroy the weapons you gave us? No, we're destroying the training ones I just gave y'all. Hearing this actually surprises them, saying, alright, as they wound up actually having to train against issei himself. Back to the video, Issei's actually doing his, normal training things. And what he's doing actually surprises everyone. Whenever he's doing his training, he does something no one's expecting. He actually made a staff for both Rias and for Rias, a staff for Asya, and a staff for Akuna. Whatever, I forgot her name. I'm sorry about that, guys. Hold on a second. For Akano, he even made one for Akano, and them all having their new staffs, asking what they were for. He said they help channel magic. Seeing that they actually would be perfect for this, these actually worked so good to channel their magic, they were actually surprised. And he said, just make sure not to use them as blunt force weapons, that would be a bad idea. True. And he actually made Rias a small sword, which was actually able to control her demonic energy, saying all she had to do was pick it up and swing down and make a slash, and it's in the form of a katana. Actually surprising Rias, saying she loved it. For Akano, it was a lightning blade, which was more along the lines of just able to shoot lightning out of it, but the more lightning power she would put into it, the more it could throw out. Surprising everyone on how much its limit was. Probably as good as Mjolnir, honestly. For Thunder's throwing, at least. Surprising everyone just a little bit, but, not being too surprised. Issei then having made 5 different swords for him and Kiba to spar with. 2 multiple wooden ones, so they would actually have that, and actual, stainless steels, different ones like that, and Kiba said, I can make my own swords, don't worry. What? Yeah, my thing is it's called Sword Birth. He's like, what the fuck? Really, man? And you didn't tell me that? I'm gonna go to all these different swords. I mean, my power is Sword Birth. I can just make my own, and you can train with those. Alright. As they would go sword to sword every day, shattering the blades, at the end, the only sword that was still around was the one that Issei made for Kiba, and the one that Issei made for himself, which was called the True Dragon Slayer, which he noted could probably withstand any sword he swung, as it was the probably best creation that took him 3 straight days of forging to make. Alright, guys, back to What If. So yeah, in this slight change being everyone's armored up, even Asya, who mainly has her regular nun attire with the armor Issei made for her, which is just, protective armor, which, I mean, it's not thick armor, but it's enough to actually tank an explosion from the Bomb Queen, or even a hit of lightning from Akano, which, if you're wondering, it's metal, so why wouldn't it just electrocute them? Well, that's just it. He makes it out of something that's not well, it is kind of electric, but its mainly just thing is it disturbs all energy. If there's any magic in it, even if it's lightning, it'll just send it flying. It'll just reflect it off. Same thing as his shields, which he's only got a handful of them, but they're pretty big. There's one that's like a giant full body shield, which he just puts in front of him, and he can just walk forwards, and it'll basically be able to tank any attack. He's got a regular one-handed shield for taking one attack, like one hit, and just straight sending it flying. Kind of think Captain America's regular shield. He's got a spiked shield, which its main point is that if you hit him, it basically makes it where if you're charging on something, he can send it at you and it would hurt you a lot. And he's got a shield that doesn't look right. It is basically a 2-arm shield, which every time he lifts his forearms forward upwards, slamming it together, it would just stomp down for it to slam in the ground and block whatever attack was coming in. It's his strongest shield, but it's also his most exhausting one to use, as if he breaks that out, it literally means no other weapon can be out. I mean, he can have the boosted gear, but even then, it struggles for the size difference. So yeah, He wears 2 gauntlets on, though, so yeah, works. Back to this thing. He basically charges and kicks a clean... Basically, issei roars out saying, "I'd like to make an announcement." And everyone can hear him because he's like using like a megaphone or something. And he's like, "Listen up, Riser. If you have any balls at all, you'll send your entire barrage right here and stay in your base. I'll be there waiting on them. And to prove I'm going to be there, I'm charging there right now." Riser hearing this saying, "I bet. So let me guess, the entire barrage, everyone else is going to come at me? They might. Who cares? I just fight between me and your entire barrage. Let's go." Riser actually being a little bit offended by this, saying, "You know what? I will. They'll all go, including my sister." Sending them all there. He said, cracking his neck, saying, "Oh yeah, let's go." Sending out the first thing he does is actually say, "The knights. You're the knights, right? I challenge you to duels. The rooks, I want to fight, bare-knuckled. Actually, gauntlet. I want to fight you, having his gauntlets up. Bishops, I don't really have any spell abilities, so that'll have to be just a fight. The pawns can join you." Hearing this, they think they're completely set, match, game done, and they wondered which order to go in. And he said, first, me versus the knights, then the rooks, then the pawns and bishops, and then the queen herself. Hearing this, they're like, alright, he won't even make it past the knights. He goes against the first knight, using the Dragon Slayer sword, which clashed perfectly against her, sending her flying. The second one, he actually had to try a little bit harder. And instead of having to use his Dragon Slayer one, whenever she tried using the elements on him, his first instinct was Ice Blade, which was actually not it. Like, she actually said, "Do you have a gear or making these?" He said, "No, I'm just pulling them out of my own storage area." "How many weapons do you have?" As his sword is not seeming to be as effective on her, he actually sent it to the side, pulling out Divine Axe Rita, which was the one he made, slinging it down, chopping clean through her weapon, and winning. Though this barely beat her, and he was actually a little heavy-winded, throwing his axe back in his thing. Then he'd also have to deal with a few other things. Now he said, alright, rooks, come at me. Both rooks went charging forward, and one of them was actually being, the one that was just like the Chinese girl, was actually being able to do pretty dang good stuff. Like, she was landing a few good hits in on him. And the one that was, dressed like the army chick, or whatever, that chick, she was getting some good hits and looks in on too. Every hit they would do would actually affect Issei a little bit. But then he started just getting into a fighting stance, one they weren't familiar with. It looked like he was just wobbling like he was drunk, and then he just straight up started fighting like a martial arts master, though he's really just going off crazy drunken style, which he'd seen a few times. And actually using his gauntlet to boost him up every 2 seconds, he was able to land it. And at the end, he was huffing and puffing a little bit, and this is when the bishop said, "Aw, do you need a break? Too bad." And they actually go with magic and start swinging at him. And they're hitting him with all these different magic spells, which he's blocking with his shields, and having to take on every single pawn at once. First, the ones with the chainsaws, which is being a little bit of a pain. Then the one with the bow staff. Mainly, he just spin kicks the chainsaws out of their hands, using his iron leg, which just kicks it out of the way for him to land the second kick, which knocks them both down to the ground. And this is when he has an idea. He hit every other pawn with dress break. As he said, "Oh, trust me, I know I like it no more than you do, but this gives me the perfect opportunity. Dragon shot." Taking out all the pawns, huffing and puffing, saying, "Trust me, it's no fun to use. I wish I could actually enjoy it, but I never get the chance to. I'd rather not use it, but I have to." Now, there is one little thing that I have to deal with, though. While Issei is still kind of like fighting, having to deal with the bishops, yes, basically just using his big shield and walking forward. Not his strongest, his second strongest, where he's just basically a riot shield walking forward, And it's doing pretty dang well. It's actually being able to block most hits. Like, there's only a few that's not working on. And that's when they use a magical spell that goes behind him and tries hitting him from behind. He'll have a smaller shield blocking that one. And he's walking forward, and then he actually has to send them both. He sends one flying and actually spins the shield. Like, imagine Captain America throwing it, hitting one in the stomach, and knocking her out. The next one, she's about to use an ice spell that would have taken him clear out of the game, which the queen basically was just in the air, so she wouldn't be affected by it. So she hit him with that. She hit with that ice spell, just for Issei to be, ooh, that's cold. Glad my armor protects me from that. What? As he showed the fleece in his armor, being like, oh, this is bullshit. As he just goes with a punch in the stomach, knocking her out. Putting his shield away, saying, now it's me on you, queen. As he threw on the boosted gear and his other gauntlet, saying, what's that other gauntlet? Oh, it's just something I made in my spare time. You make weapons? Yeah. Do you have, like, sword bursts or something? No. So the only sacred gear you have is just the boosted gear. Huh? Yeah. Whatever, let's go. And they went good and good for a few, like, hits until he was actually barely beating her. And he's basically on one leg at this point, stumbling, thinking I have to go help them just for her to take a phoenix tear. And he's like, oh, this is bullshit. Tanking a bomb, almost, which basically turned off his right arm. With only his left arm left, and his legs, he goes to keep trying to fight, and actually gets her down like this. And her saying, how? With just three, without one of his arms. And he said, sheer determination and will. Well, too bad. As she throws another phoenix tear on, he's like, what? This is bullshit. And her saying, don't hate the player, hate the game. Oh, I too hate the game. But it won't change much, as she hit his left leg. So now he's only basically hobbling on one leg, ball in his fist, and he's actually going pretty good. And he actually hit her with one dragon shot that finally took her out the game. As he's huffing and puffing, he has to use one of his swords to actually stay standing, his dragon slayer one. As he's using this to wobble around, he sees Kiba getting his sword caught, which Kiba's training with Issei every day to get stronger, even before they were supposed to train, so he's a little bit stronger. Actually able to cut clean through Riser's arm. But this is when Riser said, oh, really, Night Boy? Kicking him in the stomach, and this is when Konako would go for a punch, just to get cleanly knocked out of the fight, and a fireball hitting her, which knocked her out the game. And with Issei, he's barely even on his feet. Like, somewhat stumbling, like on one foot, and that sword is basically all that's keeping him going. And he basically goes in there, and when he gets in there, he says, promotion Rook, as he thought it to be the best of the choices at the moment, seeing that Konako was straight out the fight. When he's seeing the promotion Rook he has to do, he was completely surprised and shocked on what he had to deal with. He was a lot more durable and strong, but that didn't heal much of any of the injuries he already had. As he's basically waddling there, as Asuka actually swung her sword, and actually was able to connect to Riser, saying, oh, and your bishop uses a sword. How funny. Right for a claw to dig right into his chest, as he basically smacked Konako out of the game. As saying, I thought I took her out before. Her saying, not quite. As Rhea saying that it was just her, Asuka, like, Kiba's already been out of the game, like, after his sword was caught, he was basically knocked around until he passed out. So now it's just Rias, Akano, and Asuka. Issei barely being able to make it there, even with his promotion Rook, which allows him to barely even waddle there while bleeding almost out. Him being in the worst condition out of anyone in the game, way worse than anyone he's ever fought. While everyone's out the game, it's your determination and will keeping him standing. And this is when something really sad would happen. He gets up there to fight Riser, and actually, boom, his gear gives out and turns off. As he hit the ground on one knee, he stood back up, seeing Akano throwing a lightning bolt just to get hit with the fireball that took her out the game. And Asuka actually wound up getting not even hit, with a final, like, she actually got kicked and fell out of the game. As Issei barely even is on one foot. As he's basically swung as hard as he could with his right arm, which was barely even, usable again, barely even clashing it with Riser's stomach, just for Issei to go grab a sword, not the dragon slaying sword, just a regular, just like one. It was actually a whole different sword. It was a plain sword with the ruins, with some ruins on it. As he put every bit of magic he had left in it and swung it as hard as he could, it actually was able to cleanly chop off Riser's arm with no fire. As he said, I should have gave Kiba the sword. If only I would have realized it would help that much. As he's huffing and puffing, he does one last swing with everything he has, Riser's leg. Now Riser, having one of his legs and arms off, he says, oh really? You think that could help you that much, boy? As he actually does a kick right into Issei's midsection. Even with them gone, I'm still more dangerous than you. You're in no better condition than I. In fact, you're in worse. And every hit Riser lands starts hurting Issei more and more. Just for Issei to actually say, that I'm taking you with me. Pulling a grenade and getting right behind Riser, using him as a block as it blew up right in Riser's face. He heals from this, but saying, you thought that would work. Just for Issei to said, no. As he got Riser right in the stomach, just for Riser to say, oh really? It may not heal, but you didn't get anywhere vital. Kicking Issei in the mouth, as he's about to hit the ground. Boom. Issei falls, and Rias forfeits, being that she's completely out of magic anyway. I mean, she still tries stabbing Riser with the same sword Issei just threw to her, which was the ruined sword. And seeing this, as it was barely able to slice his other arm, almost taking it out of commission. But not quite. For him to be able to actually kick her in the jaw for her to surrender. As Issei was utterly ripping, like he was pissed. He actually wound up giving up his arm to the dragon. And Issei always wears a gauntlet, like a red gauntlet. He always wears a gauntlet on his arm, though it is different colored than what it was before. He always used to rock like one that looks like Drake, but on both arms, which the school really didn't care about. He was in the blacksmith club. Every day he would have a weapon on him. But he never used them on students, so they just really didn't care, and the student council allowed it, so it was whatever. So he never really cared about turning it off. Although now he'd have to wear his other gauntlet during classes, which he was fine doing. But they would still wind up turning into a human hand, which he stopped wearing gauntlets. They asked why he wasn't wearing his gauntlets today. He said, just simply chose not to. Instead, he showed him wearing wristbands, which had ruins on them. Anyway, back to the video. He stands up saying, fine. After he woke up, and he said, there's a party. Asia, thanks for healing me. No problem, Issei. By the way, what happened? As he said, by the way, I still need to borrow a cross, your old cross, and some holy water. Can you do that for me? Asia brings the box in, saying, here you go. Don't hurt yourself. As Issei said, it won't be me I'm hurting. Alright. Good luck. As Issei teleports off, standing like he's angered, busting in the same way, he says, Riser! You bitch-ass motherfucker! Get your ass over here! Riser saying, oh really? Come here. No. Come here. No! Come here! Fine! As he actually challenged Riser to a duel, so he's actually saying, take it. And what is your request if you win? As he said, Rias Grimmery. As he's huffing and puffing, Rias actually said, you really do that for me? As he pulls out a sword that no one had ever seen before. It had the same ruins, but it looked like it was a mix between that and his dragon slaying sword. He said, this is my ultimate blade. I call it Dragon Tamer. It may not look the same as it's maybe similar to Dragon Slayer, but it also has the ability to nullify any healing spell, any magic, so you're basically waiting time for it to either heal or anything. Though, Phoenix tears do seem to work on it a little bit, though, Just a little bit. It takes about 5 to make it where you'll heal from an arm cut off. Kind of surprising. Riser saying, what? Yeah. And you have to put all the healing, and you have to do like 12 healing spells for it to work. You're just getting little bits and little bits of your ability back. Wow, so it's actually an almost instant kill. Yeah, as he actually pulled something out, his forge hammer, which was giant. They weren't expecting to see it like this. And he said, I'm bringing out the hammer, too. Riser, seeing this, wasn't as scared as he was expecting. All Issei was wearing was blue jeans, tennis shoes, and a black tank top, unlike his actual full Kuo gear he was wearing in the cannon. And he said, well, I may as well be dealing with fire, so I'll wear this when I do that. Riser throwing fireball after fireball, Issei being able to hit him all out of his way with his forge hammer actually surprises Riser. He hasn't used that sword even once. Right when he's actually using the holy ability and weapons, he's done pretty good and actually going to scale mail. Although, as he barely is winning, he's still somewhat winning. And even though it's kind of more forcing it, he actually ends up pulling out his sword and cleanly chopping both of Riser's arms off. Riser saying, ha, I'll heal from the... Oh, wait. As his arms weren't healed at all, they were just snubs at the elbows. He says, yeah, Riser, come on, get up. Seeing this, Riser was terrified. The green emerald eyes of a raging dragon was terrifying him. And every hammer forge sounded like it was sheer power. It would break his legs, the rest of his arms, and every single part of his ribs. And then right when he's about to slam it down on Riser's face with the holy energy in it, in his gauntlet, for that final dragon shot, was just with the hammer punch afterwards. This is when, surprisingly enough, the same little devil girl, Ravel, would jump in the way, saying, please don't kill my brother. Issei saying, move, little girl, or you're next. As Riser said, I concede. As he's huffing and puffing, right? Issei saying, oh, fine. Get out of here. As he said, remember your sister saved you this one time. I recommend not needing it again. As he walks away, not really caring much what he has to do now, he's kind of surprised. He's had to tank a hell of an attack, which almost took his body apart. Though, it wasn't that big of a deal. Even though it almost took him apart, he's still standing just a little bit. Now, this was the first time he'd ever seen this kind of thing happen, where Issei was completely overwhelmed. When Issei hit the floor, he only being held up by his forge hammer, which that's actually what Mjolnir was really intended to be, was a forging hammer in some versions of the story. So yeah, I'm gonna say it looks just like Mjolnir. As you know, there's actually some runes on it. And they actually read them out, and they're Norse. Is this possible it might be the real Mjolnir? No, there's no way. As it was actually said, this is a copy of Mjolnir. It was my original forging hammer. Though I had to retire it out of use after a while. Why? Well, no one could expect me, no one was able to pick it up but me. Really? Yeah. I started forging with my friends, so yeah, I was forced to. And back to What If. He basically starts, going through things, and he has to deal with the Kokobeel incident. In this version, Fried is still holding his scars. He holds them, kind of angered every time that he thinks of it and sees them. And every day he trains to get strong enough to defeat them. He's around the same strength as Kiba was in the final, like when he actually had to defeat Fried for the last time, when he actually killed Fried. When Fried became a devil. Now, this will be a little bit different than what he's going to have right now. Now, when he gets those 3 holy swords, holy sword, that one is canon. He actually was beating Kiba, which in this version, whenever he was beating Kiba, and Kiba was left for almost dead, just because Fried had to teleport away and do something, is the only reason why Kiba wasn't dead. Though Issei, on one of his nightly runs to go grab some material, saw Kiba. Confused on why Kiba was lying on the ground like this, he picked him up and ran him over to his house, to Issei's house, and Issei said, "You good, man?" Noting there was holy energy marked on him, Issei saying, "I may know something for this. Asuya!" Asuya came down after he kind of called for her. She came down saying, "Yes, Issei, what is it? Back from parts already?" "No, I wasn't able to get that, but this is more important." Seeing Kiba hurt, Asuya had to heal him, and he's saying, "You good, my boy?" "Yeah, I just got reminded why I joined this team." "Was it the Holy Swords, bro?" "How'd you..." "I can tell. When I saw Excalibur, you were super pissed, and I know it's one of the holiest swords there is. I didn't know at the time, but now I do." "I get it, man." So, what did the Excaliburs do? As Issei actually was told his story, saying, "Wow, that is royally fucked up." Well, whatever. So, tell me this. You can't do it on your own, can you? Not only do you have to find this Valper Galilei, whatever his name is, but you also have to deal with Freed now, who wields the Holy Swords. For all we know, they're working together. How about this? If they're teaming up on you, as Issei put his arm out saying, "I'll help as well. You don't have to do this. This is my fight." And Issei said, "So? You helped me with mine. The only reason I joined y'all's Parage was to take on that Rainier chick and kill her for killing me. The guy who tried killing you, I feel like you have my back for that. You saved mine, I saved you. Got that? Besides, that free dude already has kind of done stuff to mess up with us anyway. So we are all the reasons to whoop him." Hearing this, she was completely... This is when Kiba said, "Fine, if you're gonna help me fight, then we're doing this my style, though. Swords and swords alone." "Really, man? I mean, you can use your boosted gear, but no attacks, just plain, no just bullcrap attacks like that. Just swords." Alright. As he asked Reese if he could promote tonight. If he was at the, fighting an enemy at their... He asked if he could promote tonight, and Reese was like, "Sure, you have promotion anytime you wish." And he turns into... And at this point, Issei's at that point where he's just about able to turn into Balance Breaker. Although, it's not as good as it would be, because he can actually go into a mild version of Balance Breaker. It's not perfect, but it's somewhat usable. Now, Issei goes into this and says, "Kiba, use your armor." "What?" "Yeah, your armor, man. I made it for you to get your work done. And it seems like it's the biggest work we gotta do." Kiba armors up, and they start doing it. They find this whole thing out, and in this version, whenever, Issei still goes to the club and all that, and so does Kiba, but every night, instead of doing his normal forges, he's busy, helping Kiba find this dude. And this is when Kiba was surprised to see what he saw. When those two nuns actually were talking to Issei, right before he left, it wasn't really a big deal, and then he had to talk with... They asked to, talk to the devils the next day. Issei saying, "Sure. We'll talk to y'all tomorrow." They get there, all that goes canon. But in this version, when they're insulting Asuya, which Kiba isn't there yet, he's even still debating whether he should come, but hearing that there's holy sword wielders, he's like, "I'm gonna be there." Now, this made it where Kiba basically busts in the door like, "Who wants a fight?" Which sounds odd for Kiba. So like I said, Issei's, they have to deal with the whole same fight as in canon, to deal with the whole thing. Issei is being so much stronger than he was in canon, and Kiba, who's had to train more in canon, both of them being more dangerous foes than they were in canon. And Issei wasn't planning on hitting her with the dress break unless it was absolutely necessary to take her out of the fight, and him having to back kick. And Issei saying, "Noted, even though me and him already have beef we gotta deal with." Now, that fight would go very differently. One, Issei's basically just mainly weaving her attacks, and he pulled out the Dragon Slayer. The Dragon Tamer, not Dragon Slayer. Sorry about that, guys. So yeah, he pulls out Dragon Slayer, not Dragon Tamer, and then he pulls out Dragon Tamer itself, pulling both of them out. It absolutely surprises them that he's wielding this massive sword, as Dragon Tamer is actually a 7-foot sword. It's as thick. Basically, imagine Gut Sword from Berserk with dragon fighting marks, like with like slash marks in it, and covered in runes. And it's even like bigger than that. And it's super heavy. But even though it's made of lightweight steel he made, of that special material he has, it's heavy enough to where it can outweigh where it's heavier than most, like 99% of the swords that you could find. Like, it's heavy boy. So, whenever he swings this thing, it absolutely surprises at this. It's a weapon that makes even Kiba's best swords look like they're amateur made. And even this is when Issei said, Kiba! Kiba turning his head saying you shouldn't, as, you know, I forgot what her name was, the blue hair and green haired chick would say, you should never take your eyes off your opponent. As Issei, this is when he said, oh, don't worry, it wasn't for long. Pulling out this giant sword, grabbing the giant sword Issei had, and saying, whoa! Right when she goes through that same Excalibur destruction, you know, that full hit, Issei's off the ground, landing on his feet again once it stops, while Kiba is basically off the ground swinging his mighty sword, and it's just boom! Her having to actually catch it, saying, what? And it basically brought her down to her knees, absolutely defeating her, and then Kiba taking his regular sword, Excalibur, that Issei made for him, and actually being right on her neck, saying, you would have died easily by me. But you had Issei's help. Yeah, and what do you guess would happen? Every night we do in this thing, we're fighting. We train together like brothers. What do you expect? Of course I've got his help. And they actually surprising them, saying, really? Wow. And this is when Issei would say, without proper help, neither of you could do anything, as he pulls out a giant forge hammer, just like in this picture, and slams it down, almost shattering the Excalibur it hit, dropping Irina to the ground. Zenobia is the blue-haired chick's name, as they both were like, how did we lose? You know, and this is when they hear, so, y'all sure y'all want to go about this alone? We just showed that 2 of us can take y'all on even with holy swords. To be fair, you were pulling hammers never out of nowhere. True. And you got an assist from him with the sword. True, but you also will have to acknowledge that while that did happen, we would already be fighting as a team. Me and him, at least. As long as we wanted to keep them out of the fight. Maybe Konako would join us, but she'd have to be armor-clad. What do you mean armor-clad? You know those giant suits of armor you see? Those two suits of armor you see when you walked in? Yeah, the smaller one and the white knight looking one? Yeah, that's those 2. What? Yeah. I mean, I usually just rely on balance break, but even I've got a set of armor. Heck, we all do. As he actually said, we can all stand it out. And at this point, everyone has their armor stand right in the room. Wait, so that was what the other stands of armor were? Yes. Right across from where, you know, on the other side of where, you know, Akano stands is where her suit of armor stands. And right next to Rias. And right behind Rias is where her suit stands. Asia's stands in one corner, Issei's being the giant one on the other side. Though, kind of surprising on how monstrous it looks. Now, he doesn't even know about Gasper, so he has no clue about making Gasper gear. But then, he does his thing, you know. They have to fight the Kokubeel fight. Now, that goes very different. When Kokubeel still sets those dogs out, to, you know, stall for time until that, the absolute sword is done, Issei's saying, never interrupt a man while he's making a weapon. But then said, but if you're sending dogs at me, Konako, Kiba, yes, take the one on the right. I got the big one on the left. And the one on the left was actually about twice the size of the other one. As it actually kind of surprises them that Issei's willing to take on the bigger one on his own. As he pulled his actual giant sword out and saying, Kiba, what? Here. Kiba catches the sword, saying, "Are you sure you won't need it?" "Nah," cracking his neck. "I'll be fine." As he actually just straight up digs one foot forward and flashes forward with Dragon Slayer, cleanly chopping the Cerberus' head off, or whatever it was. Yeah, it was a Cerberus. All three of the heads rolling to the floor, and him basically dousing it in flames. Now you get why it's called Dragon Slayer. Issei then seeing Kiba struggling a little bit, swinging, and Konako struggling just a little bit, fighting against that thing, though their speed and durability have greatly improved, they're doing great. This is when Issei said, "You need a hand," saying, "Yes, a little bit." And this is when Aussie, of all people, says, "Fine." And she didn't want to be shown up, so she flies forward with no one expecting this. And she stabs her sword clean into the stomach of this thing. It looks down. They all look down, saying, "What?" She's got the killing blow on this thing, cleanly piercing its heart with the sword that Issei made that would extend, as he cleanly pierced through the back by pulling it back out, as Issei has to pick it up and make sure it doesn't fall on Asia. And so when Issei would say, "Hey, we took care of your little puppies," Kokubio being surprised, saying, "Alright, well, now we're just going to wait for that sword to be made." And right then it finishes. And he said, "Hey, you two, fight this guy, fight him." Saying, "What?" "Yeah, you two," as he was pointing to Kiba and Zenobia, "have to fight him," pointing to Freed. Though they really don't have their weapons. Though Issei, this is when Kiba said, "Alright, you know what, Issei? Sure." Hearing the same stuff, he actually made his same balance breaker, which Issei was impressed by. This balance breaker was amazing. It was a badass sword. And she still pulled out Durandal, and they were actually using those too. And Issei then said, "Here." Saying, "What?" "Here. Here you go, man. Your other sword." "What? But I just got my balance breaker." "And this is your original sword, bro. Here." As he cut, what's actually surprised him, he caught his regular Excalibur. "Use it well." "And then you, wielder of Durandal," as he gave her another sword, surprising her, saying, "What's this for?" "Use it." "Alright." And this is when she actually put some magic in it, noting the sword had a similar capability that no one ever had seen. Its ability was called Whip Sword. She would swing it down, which would go normally, but anytime she wanted to, she could swing it down a little bit. Like she could activate a button on it, which it would whip around and start ripping apart whatever it was cutting. As actually was able to get free a few times, as he was able to still make that little grand escape when they were fighting when Kokubio threw the fights. That distraction gave him just enough time to go, "I'm out," and Free just straight took off, leaving the sword, because he couldn't really grab it. He just took off at the barrier. Right when Issei said, "Alright, now Kokubio, you're on me. Come here." Hearing this, Kokubio said, "No, I'm not going to fight you." "Why not? You afraid to get your ass whooped?" "On the contrary, you won't even take 4 wings." "Really?" As he completely pulled out his hammer, saying, "Are you sure about that?" "It couldn't be, could it? That's Mjolnir." "No, but it might as well be." As Issei starts swinging this, every hit he does actually being able to beat Kokubio down, and even when he doesn't land a hit, he'll just let go of his hammer and call it back to his hand to hit another time. At one point, even kicking Kokubio to the side to land an elbow, right followed up by a hammer strike to the midsection of his stomach. At the end, Kokubio's a little bit beaten up more than he was in canon, by far, and Issei said, "Oh, finally, I've done it." Kokubio being a little bit confused, saying, "I'm not done yet, you know." "Yeah, but look at me. I'm the only one who's injured here. Me and you are just about the same injuries. Mine are a little bit worse than yours." "Yeah, so you lost this fight." As Kokubio's about to try making a light spear, the biggest one he'd made before, Issei actually pulling out his shield, blocking it. this is when the white dragon would actually pop in, saying, you know, he could probably be taken out by y'all, but we need him for questioning, as he Drape got his wings torn off by Volley, and Volley took him in the same way. That goes the same. The meeting goes just about the same, though Volley wanting to fight them at the end made it where Issei was like, oh really? Cracking is the next thing, then let's go. Him thrusting forward and actually doing a landing hit after hit, even with a hammer, but every divide it would be, even when you tried using the universal divide, Kokubeel, I mean, bro, that one fallen angel, Azazel, made it where Issei went full god mode and started just beating down on Kokubeel. I mean, on Volley. And Volley was just on the ground. Right when he's about to get killed by a punch from Issei with his new sword that he was given, that other dragon slaying sword, the original one from the series. Right when he's about to cut his head off, he gets completely stopped by a bow staff, which barely was able to stop him, and the wielder was basically struggling himself, saying, I think it's time we get him out of here, as Kuroka basically got him out of there. Kuroka had to use her magic to get him out of there, and saying, come on, as he basically jumped, as that monkey dude jumped in the little, like, area too, and said, we gone. Being kind of happy, saying, that was exhausting. Surprised a lot by this. He's actually gets caught by his, his entire group and taken all the way back home. And to this point, he's just basically stumbling around, doing his main thing. Eating some good food, doing some good stuff, not really caring what's going down. And this is when he has to hear about the whole thing in going to Kyoto. He doesn't really care. That would go basically as canon. He still needs help from that other dragon to help him fight. That would go basically canon, but now Issei thinks more about bow staffs. Would that be a good weapon? And an extending one might be monstrous. Using magic to make it extend and distend would be perfect though. And he actually made one that was basically a rip-off of, basically looked like Dragon Ball, that one. It looks just like it, which is kind of where Issei got the, idea. That and the fact it was able to block one of his sword swings. So, yeah. Issei at this point then has to walk all the way to, have to deal with the whole Kyoto thing. That goes as canon. But then he has to deal with Cyber Org. And with Cyber Org, he actually has a similar exact fight. Like, they still had to take one of Cyber Org's arms off for it to even become close to a fair fight. Now, this did mean that, well, they did have to take his arm off. It was barely even working in their favor. Like, it wasn't really even in their favor. It was a struggle anyway. Now, that did make it where, while it was a struggle, it wasn't an overwhelming defeat. And they were able to actually still win with Issei going into the knuckle drive. This is when Rias would grab Issei's sword, Dragon Tamer, and actually said, Issei! As Issei just has, right as he's about to do, right as he lands a single swing, right when he's about to chop the dude clean in two, this is when Rias would have handed him a sword, and Issei's right about to chop him in two, right for the line to say, please don't, he's already out cold, even though he's still standing. Issei saying sure, as he landed and used his sword as a crutch, and starting to hobble away with one of his other swords, Dragon Slayer, to use as a crutch. Using that and the other dragon sword as crutches, he was basically walking away. Now, at this point, he was kind of exhausted, as he wanted to actually say, is there a way I can meet the god of, the Greek god Hephaestus? And this is when it was we'd have to talk to Zeus about it, but sure. This is when he'd actually meet Hephaestus, his hero, saying, Hephaestus, I'm a huge fan. Look away, boy, you don't want to see my face. Yes, I do. Dude, you're my hero. I've seen every picture of you that there is documented. Really? Turning around saying, well, so, could you teach me how to make better swords? Kid, I've seen your swords. They're as good as mine. I can't teach you how to make anything better. I literally don't know how. I will say this, keep practicing. You're getting amazing. I'm the god of the forge, but soon I might have to relinquish that title to you. Hearing this, issei says, really? Maybe, if you can earn it. Until then, let's make some weapons. As he would actually make a broadsword, which was his favorite, which was actually something he actually wound up giving to Irina, and actually having it being blessed to be a holy sword. Irina seeing this thing, noting it was odd, and saying, what could it do? This is when issei started smiling. Well, take it for a test drive, and you'll find out. Noting it was basically like every piece of Excalibur put together. Yeah, it's just about as powerful as Excalibur was in its prime. What? Yeah. Kind of hard to wield, but it's pretty good. Well, wow, I wasn't expecting that. Well, get used to it. Good luck. Alright. As issei would finally say, looking upon his family in a happy thing, teaching his children how to forge, even giving them, gears of their own, of his own creation, and teaching them how to make their own. And that's the end of the video.